Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to ISNA's Friday Reflections. I hope and I pray all of you are doing well and all of you are safe. Today, our guest speaker is going to be Dr. Fahad Khan, so I will inshallah go ahead and introduce him. Dr. Fahad Khan is a licensed clinical psychologist with a doctorate in clinical psychology and a master's degree in biomedical sciences. He is a Hafiz of the Quran and has studied Islamic studies with various scholars. He currently serves as the Deputy Director at Khalil Center, the largest provider of Muslim mental health in North America, supervising clinical and research work. Dr. Fahad also teaches undergraduate as well as graduate courses in various academic institutions. He is actively involved in professional organizations and is currently the co-chair of the Legislative Committee of Illinois Psychological Association. More information can be found at his website, which is fahadkhan.org. Please welcome Dr. Fahad Khan.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khairan, Brother Basharat and Isna for having me for this opportunity. So inshallah today I think the topic is very important and I want to take some time, and I think because the day is Friday and alhamdulillah one of the sunnahs of the Friday that we have is to recite Surah Al-Kahf. So as I was asked to speak and on reflection on the day of Yawm al-Jum'ah, I wanted to talk about this sunnah of reciting Surah Al-Kahf and why we do recite Surah Al-Kahf. And I also wanted to not only talk about Surah Kahf in general, but go specifically into one area and talk about psychospiritual aspects of that specific area. So we know that Surah Kahf has 4 themes in it, and there are 4 big stories that are mentioned. Now, the 3 stories that are mentioned are ones that we hear in our khutbahs frequently, and those I think a lot of people are very well aware of. The one that is the surah which is named after the Ashab al-Kahf, the people of the cave. And that talks about the trial of the faith and how the people struggle with their faith. And this serves as a reminder for us on a weekly basis, especially those people that are living in the West. But now because we live in a global community, I think the trial of faith is something that everyone, whether you live in the East or the West, I think everyone, whether you live in a Muslim country or non-Muslim country, that we all suffer from. So it's a reminder for us that sometimes to protect ourselves, we might have to go into our little caves and to isolate ourselves from the fitnas of this world at times for the sake of Allah. The second story in the Surah Kahf is the story of Musa and Khidr, and that story is reminding us of the trial of knowledge. So, we can have all the degrees in the world, all the knowledge in the world, and we can be as knowledgeable as a prophet of Allah, which was Musa alayhi salam. Prophets, Anbiya, we know are among the most knowledgeable people to walk on this planet, because they had their knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The most knowledgeable that we know to be Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but still Musa alayhi salam had to go and seek knowledge from someone else, Khidr alayhi salam in this case. And so that story is a reminder for us that no matter how much knowledge we achieve, no matter how many degrees we have at the end of the day, that ultimate knowledge is divine knowledge that comes from Allah, that there will always be someone else who can teach us something, and we should never look down upon someone else because they might not have a degree higher than us. So that's another reason why reading Surah Kahf on a weekly basis is important for us. The third story that comes in is the story of Dhul Qarnayn, and this reminds us about power, because Dhul Qarnayn was very powerful. He conquered the world, and so there's stories reminding us about the aspects of power. And again, no matter how powerful you can be, and recently we saw this shift in power that happened in the United States, that you can be as powerful as the president of the United States, but even though the previous 3 presidents were re-elected, this person did not get re-elected. So At the end of the day, all power ultimately belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we at the end of the day are still powerless when it comes to the will and the divine power. The one I want to talk about is the one that is least mentioned usually in the khutbahs, is the trial of wealth. And it's important for us, especially now, because we went through this past year where people suffered a lot of loss of wealth, and primarily due to the COVID-19 situation. And it's unfortunate that there were some people who actually even gained more wealth. So if you looked at some of the corporations like Amazon and others, and I'm sure corporations that made hand sanitizers and masks, I'm sure they also profited from that. But what we learn is that in this story, mentioned in Surah Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the example where he says, وَضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثَلَ الرَّجُلَيْنِ جَعَلْنَا لِأَحَدِهِمَا جَنَّتَيْنِ مِنْ أَعْنَابٍ وَحَفَفْنَاهُمَا وَجَعَلْنَا بَيْنَهُمَا زَرْعًا. That he talks about the story of these two individuals, and one of them had these two gardens. And so Allah is talking about this one person who had a lot of wealth, immense amount of wealth. And when he received that wealth, and ultimately when we get wealth, we're supposed to be humble towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because our faith, our belief at the end of the day as Muslims, is that everything comes to us from Allah, everything is a test from Allah. That's what the surah is reminding us. And if Allah wills it, he can take that back whenever he wants. But this individual in the surah, he obviously, when he received that wealth, he became he started boasting about it. He started becoming proud about the wealth that he received, and he started saying to the other individual, the other friend that he had, that I'm greater than you in wealth and superior in manpower. Right? He would make these comments, "An aktharu minka malan wa a'azzu nafara," based on the gardens that he had. And his friend would remind him that, look, your garden can be taken away. Something can happen, some flooding or some kind of a disaster can happen, or some lightning can strike, or something can happen that can basically take all that away from you. But that wouldn't affect the pride that he felt. And oftentimes this happens to individuals, that when people have a certain level of wealth, and if you look at some of the wealthy individuals that exist now, the amount of wealth they have, if you even try to estimate how much is $1 billion, it's a lot of money, right? I mean, taking away, for us, like for some of the middle class people that live in the United States, for us, $100,000 is a lot of money. You can buy a house with $100,000 or $200,000. Compare $100,000 or $200,000 to $1 billion. That's a lot of money. And so for someone with $1 billion, for them, telling them, hey, something can happen to your wealth, they will laugh at that. They'll say, what do you mean something can happen to my wealth? That does nothing to them. And this is what was happening to this individual as well, because for them, that kind of comment wasn't making any difference in their behavior, in their perspective. And then the person, he would enter his property, and while he was wrongdoing his soul, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, that his attitude wasn't hurting Allah, right? He was only causing pain to his own self, right? Because he was losing his self. See, in another verse in the Quran, in Surah Hashr, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about, he says that don't be like those individuals, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ, that when you begin to lose focus of Allah, when you begin to forget Allah, what does Allah do? Allah makes you forget your own self. So in this case, that he would do what? He will do dhulm on his own self, right? So he's not hurting Allah, he's hurting himself. He would say, what? قَالَ مَا أَظُنُّ أَن تَبِيدَ هَذِهِ أَبَدًا. He would say, I don't think that this will ever perish. That's what people think who are very wealthy. This is not going away. How can this ever go away? And then he would say, nor do I think that the hour will ever come. Like, this meaning this thing will never come to an end. And then he says, if I am in fact returned to my Lord, that even if I do go back, that I'll probably get a better outcome, right? That khayran minha munqalaba, that something better will come of this, in the hereafter as well. So he wasn't completely a kafir, but even with that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used the word kufr and even shirk to describe what he was doing. Now, he wasn't worshiping idols or whatnot, but this type of quote unquote shirk here, and I'm not a mufassir, so take this with a grain of salt, is more of the hidden type of shirk that person can commit. Meaning, when you take something like your status, like your knowledge, in this case, your wealth, and you give it more importance than Allah and His Messenger, and give it more importance than something that Allah has given more importance to. And you start boasting about it, and you think that, oh, this will never go away, right? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in the Quran, kullu man alayha fan, that everything will perish except Allah, right? And then there, and the hour will come, and He's saying, well, the hour won't come, meaning this will never come to an end. So that is a a lesser form of shirk, because you're giving the wealth more importance, right? Now, Brother Bashar knows me, and people who know me as well can say that one of my spiritual mentors is Allama Iqbal, and I study him and I adore him and his work, and I always seek guidance from him. And he says in his poetry as well that what people tend to do is they create these idols in their own minds, right? And one of those idols he also mentions is this wealth, the malat dolat dunya, right? This wealth of this world, and these idols that people create in their minds. He says that the problem is that these are all idols in your mind, because ultimately there's no one worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this person was doing the same thing, because at the end of the day, again, we have to keep in mind that this worldly life is what is temporary. Most people that spend their entire life chasing wealth, most people, first of all, we know they don't enjoy their life. And you can look around you. You can even look at your own lives, if this is the type of lifestyle that you're living, or that I'm living. If we're spending time and energy running after, a big house, a big bank balance, trying to, and we've seen people in our community. I've known people myself who've tried to, whether something small as like I'm saving money for my child's wedding or my child's tuition, or something as big as I'm saving money to start a company. And then what happens? 20 years down the line, that child is not in this person's life, whether the child passed away or whether the child chose not to be in their life for whatever personal reasons, they didn't get along and they chose to go in their own way, or the company didn't work out and they died, and the company went under. And so all that energy went to waste. So at the end of the day, this is what Iqbal is referring to, this idol that we create in our own mind, because it's idol's not real, and then we worship it, right? That's the type of idol worshiping. That's, even though it's not a open shirk, it's not a shirk in its true sense, it's still nevertheless that a type of shirk that we commit in our own minds. And that's problematic for us, right? And that's what the surah is trying to remind us here, that look, on a weekly basis, that at the end of the day, the wealth that we have, and even the same surah in the verse afterwards says, Al-malu wal-banuna zinatul hayatid dunya, that this wealth and children are what? They're just adornment for this worldly life, right? So, if you have money, of course we're supposed to live a good life. There's no doubt about it. I mean, no one argues that. We know the Sahaba, some of the Sahaba lived a good life. They had, in nice homes, they had good clothes that they wore. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's the adornment of just this worldly life. That's not attributed to the hereafter. And there's nothing wrong with even having that. But we don't make that part of the purpose in this life. Because then the ayah continues and says, وَالْبَاقِيَاتُ الصَّالِحَاتِ خَيْرٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّكَ ثَوَابًا وَخَيْرٌ أَمَلًا. But the everlasting good deeds are far better with your Lord in reward and in hope, right? So at the end of the day, the good deeds, what you do with that money, is more important. So if you try to keep it, which is what people try to do oftentimes, most people that come, I'm a clinical psychologist, so obviously I do counseling and individual counseling and marital counseling. Most people that come to me with anxiety, and anxiety is very prevalent now because of COVID. It was always very prevalent, but now with COVID, it's exacerbated. Most people that come to me with anxiety, it's always because of these kind of situations where they're trying to save money for something. They have some kind of a goal. I want to achieve some kind of a target. I want to start a business. I want to have, I want to save up for my wedding. I want to pay this off. I want to pay that. I want to buy that car. I want to have this and that. Because they're trying to get to that point for some kind of happiness, unfortunately, some kind of satisfaction, right? And what we fail to realize is that ultimately there is no satisfaction in this world. That is the reality of this world. That there is no such thing as happiness or ultimate happiness. You can find moments of happiness, right? You can be happy in this moment or that moment, but to achieve ultimate happiness, like serene comfort, peacefulness, zen, as they call it, all the time, that is impossible to achieve in this world, right? So chasing after that, especially through money, is a path that has no end, right? And while doing that, losing your sleep over it, over some people are doing two jobs, for example. And I've seen, like, I have a I've worked with people, for example, they're working two jobs. When you ask them, why are you doing it? I'm trying to pay off my house. I also have a Roth IRA, of some Fidelity account and some other account, and 401ks and whatnot. Why are you doing this? So I can retire and relax. And I can tell you, as a clinical psychologist, there's data to prove that after retirement, anxiety and sometimes suicidal rate and divorce rate goes up. So ultimately, what people are trying to do is they're trying to retire early so that their mental health can decrease. And one of the advice that I gave to my father when he arrived at the year of retirement was, I said, please do not retire. Meaning, you can legally retire, but keep yourself busy, because if you didn't do that, it will drive you insane. So keeping yourself busy, keeping yourself as Allama Iqbal might say, like active, because this life demands that activity from you, is part of being a healthy individual, a healthy Muslim. The anxiety that we feel is not because of the lack of money and comfort. Rather, that's the reality of this world, and that's part of being a traveler. That's what Rasulullah said: live in this world as if you're a traveler, right? In another Farsi line Allama wrote, and this is beautiful. This is from a poem where he's with Rumi, because he considers Rumi his spiritual mentor. And there's a conversation going on, but the line is where he says, "Lazzat-e sair ast maqsood-e safar, gar nigah bar ashiyan dari mein par." That if he says the object of journey, the object of safar or sair, is to enjoy this sair, enjoy this movement, right? Because if you're in this world and we're journeying through this world, then you have to enjoy the journey. You have to enjoy the movement. That's the whole point of this world, right? And if your object is to return, if your objective is to return back to the nest, then don't start flying. Then don't even begin the journey. Like, what? Why are you even trying to do that? Why are you even looking at it from that perspective? If you're trying to have this kind of a station, this kind of a nest that you're planning on going back to, right? So objective of this world is to really prepare for the next, and ultimately what to see our creator. That's what we're supposed to do. And even the Sahaba, for example, we go back to that. Uthman radiallahu anh, for example, had a lot of wealth, a lot of money. And there's multiple examples that we have from the Sirah where, an example where he gave so much wealth that Rasul would take, the coins that he gave and lift them up and say, and he said, even after today, even if he didn't do anything, that, you're guaranteed Jannah. He was guaranteed Jannah in his life. And mostly because of his wealth, right? The sacrifice he made was through his wealth. And so, he got closer to Allah, to Rasulullah through his wealth. So ultimately, our objective is to prepare for the next, to see our creator. And some Sahaba did it through their wealth. So it is possible for some of us to do that through our wealth. So there's nothing wrong with having big businesses, successful businesses, but we can't lose sight of what the objective is supposed to be. We can't lose focus of why we're doing it. So if we're doing it because we're trying to have a comfortable life, right, and beyond what's acceptable comfort, right? So for example, if we if we want and I'll give you another example. So most of us who are either immigrants or first generation here, we can say that we struggled. We lived in smaller houses. Sometimes we had to share rooms with our siblings, same gender, same sex siblings. And so, we were okay. But then what happens is that as we get comfortable, we start thinking, maybe, our children need separate rooms. Okay, so then we give our kids separate rooms. We have two boys. We might give one boy one room, with the other boy another room. Then we might think, okay, now that I have more money and I've paid off my house, maybe we should move on to a bigger house because I need my own office. right? And then we move on to another house, and then now I have my own office. So then I start thinking, okay, well now we have another. I have paid off this house, right? I can easily make a payments for this house. What's the next step? Well, maybe I should get a house that has two living rooms, because kids want to play in one room, and guests might come, even though guests only come maybe once every other month or whatever, but they need a place to. So you see, this goes back to what Alama was saying, that this is the idol that we're worshiping in our mind, because it's a never ending battle. This is what we try to chase, and it leads us nowhere. I mean, if there was an end to it, we can say that, okay, fine, this is the objective that we have, this is what I'm trying to achieve. But psychologically, as a psychologist, I can tell you, spiritually, the Quran and the Sunnah and the Sufi, they'll all tell you the same thing, that this is a never-ending battle. And that's why the Surah Kahf, and they're important to read this, by the way. Most people, myself included, when we read these surahs and we read the Quran, we don't have that relationship with the Quran. We just passively read it. We don't know what we're reading. But it's important to read it with translation, because this is why we're asked to read Surah Kahf every week, so that we're reminded that don't do it for that sake. Because if you keep doing it, that's a never-ending battle, and you're never going to win. Ultimately, inside of us, not only are we fighting, part of our ruh, according to some scholars, has this animalistic aspect, which drives us to do things that that are animalistic in nature. We also have the nafs inside of us, right? And at its lowest state, the nafs will drive us to do things that are pleasing to us, right? And then we also have shaitan, right? So shaitan is putting thoughts in our mind, like fears. Are you sure you want to do this? For example, another thought that comes to my mind, and I had a client that I dealt with this as well, that how much money should you save for a rainy day fund? Is $500 sufficient? Well, but and then and I asked him the question. I said, okay, come up with an amount. What do you think is sufficient? And this person said, well, I think if I lost my job, I want to have at least $5,000 in my bank account. And I said, okay, how did you come up with that number? And gave me a formula calculation. It was based off of some amount because of rent and whatnot. Or okay, I said, but what if that happened? What if your car also broke down the same? Oh yeah, I didn't think about that. So then increase that number to 7,000. Okay, and then I said, well, what if that also happened? What if your spouse needed surgery or something? I didn't think about that. Now it's 10,000. So then I was trying to make him think that you realize that there's no end to that. When you think of a rainy day fund, there is no end to that. So there's nothing wrong with saving money, but the mindset that comes with that, like, I need to keep saving because of this fear, this shaitan the fear that shaitan puts in our mind, that save it for this reason, because who knows what might happen. This is where we have to bring in our aqidah and fight that fear that, look, ultimately wealth belongs to Allah. And so we have to have some faith in Allah while we put some, while we have some savings as well. There's nothing wrong with that. And we give to sadaqah, because ultimately we know through hadith, Allah does not decrease our wealth if we give to charity. So donate to ISNA, donate to organizations, donate to your local, masajid, donate to your poor relatives. Right? And again, live in this world with the objective, which is mentioned in the last verse, and we'll end with that, with the last verse of the Surah Kahf, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, that, say, O Prophet, that I'm just a human just like yourself, right? And then he says at the end of the ayah that فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ. This is very important, that whosoever hopes to for the meeting with their Lord. Okay, now it's important, meeting with their Lord. Why is that important? Because you see, there's a hadith in if you read even the Riyadh al-Salihin, for example, a very important book of hadith. One of the last hadith in there talks about how after the day of judgment has ended, people have entered Jannah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will converse with the people of Jannah. And, I can't remember the exact words, but it goes something like this, that he will ask them, are you happy? Are you satisfied? And they will, of course, they will be happy and satisfied. And he'll say, and then he will unveil himself, meaning he will bring himself in their presence, and that will be the most amount of happiness they will ever experience. Meaning that Jannah is part of the happiness, but the ultimate happiness is what? Is seeing, is being in company, in is meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So that's what Allah is talking about in this surah. فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ, whoever hopes to meet with their Lord, فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا. Then let them do good deeds and associate none in the worship of their Lord. And in that situation, again, in that worship, we're talking not just about worshiping idols. We're talking about worshiping individuals, whether it's your family, your spouse. We're talking about worshiping your status. We're talking about worshiping your degrees, your intellect. We're also talking about worshiping your wealth. So if we're doing that, may Allah protect us from that. And again, even Allama Iqbal, in very famous line of his, he talks about this too when he says, ye jannat mubarak rahe zahidon ko ke main aapka samna chahta hu. He's talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says that the people who are in constant worship and ritualistic worship, right? They're praying, they're doing dhikr, they can have this heaven. I just want to be in your company. I just want to be in your presence, O Allah, right? So we hope to be at that level that we can be in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But to be in that presence, we have to eliminate these idols that we have in our minds. And one of those is this wealth. So we ask Allah that He protects us from that, from a spiritual end as well as from a psychological end. And so to do that, we have to let go of these anxieties that we have. And to do that, we have to go back to Surah Kahf, read it with translation. So I would advise myself first and foremost, and anyone who hears this, to do that regularly, because it is a sunnah and we're asked to do that. So may Allah protect us. May Allah allow us to incorporate the lessons that we learn from the Quran and Sunnah into our lives. Jazakumullah khair for this opportunity again. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallahu khairan. Thank you so much, Dr. Fahad, for your time today. MashaAllah, for a beautiful talk, for these beautiful reminders for all of us. Today is Jummah. Inshallah, we all will benefit from your advice. And we hope to have you back on this program, inshallah, soon. Thank you to all our audience for taking time and staying with us. Inshallah, we will continue our virtual programming. As you know, for the last close to 1 year, we have been, because of the pandemic, have been shifting to virtual platforms. So inshallah, we'll continue our Friday reflections every Friday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. And many other programs ISNA is regularly conducting. We recently had our West Coast Education Forum with about 600 attendees. We will be organizing another education forum in the month of April. Please visit our website, isna.net. Sign up for the e-newsletter, which comes out every week on Wednesday, so that you can stay informed with our ongoing programming. Jazakallahu khairan. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.